Hi guys, so sitting on couches can be a big aggravator for people, and it's why I would slip under the category of a passive aggravator. So active aggravators are movement based. They're usually if you bend down and pick something up the wrong way, it catches your back, or you move an awkward way in the car or something, you get that instant feedback, so you know that movement wasn't good for you. Passive aggravators are a little bit more insidious because they don't always necessarily give you instant feedback. It's more about sort of, the poisons in the dose, so it's the amount of time that you're exposed to them. And it could only be that your posture's a little bit off, or because you're there for an hour or 2 hours, that's what causes the problem. And again, obviously you're not always aware, because usually with passive aggravators, usually you're watching TV or at dinner or you're at work and your mind's elsewhere, you don't realise you've slipped into those bad positions. So the general idea is to kind of manage passive aggravators when you're sitting, is that you want the furniture to do the work for you. So that A, you haven't got to try and hold yourself bolt upright, because eventually you're going to get tired and your muscles get sore from that. And B, if your mind's elsewhere, you don't eventually just slump into a bad position. The furniture will kind of stop that from happening and give you some good support to help keep that back, feeling fresh, so you preserve your bank account, but also you avoid the neuromuscular inhibition that you tend to get. So if you're in an aggravating position, not only does it drain your bank account, but also inhibit the muscles that you need to use for good movement and to keep your back safe, so particularly core muscles and your glutes as well. So those that tend to have hip issues, particularly in one hip, you've got unmanaged passive aggravators somewhere where you're kind of buckling to the side and shutting down that hip and that glute, and that's what's causing your pain. So when we look at, sitting at a couch, just my crew drawing from the side, so imagine this is like looking on from the side. So we've got a few things to consider. So obviously the most obvious that most people think about is lumbar support. So generally on a lot of couches, the basis could be all right, but it's the weak spot is the material, the foam, or whatever they choose to use in the actual cushions themselves. So the most obvious is the lumbar support. So if you feel like you're not getting the right lumbar support, you feel like you're going to kind of, your back's going to arch in here because it's not getting the support, obviously it's very easy to buy yourself some lumbar support to put in there. Sometimes I get my guys just to use, if they're not sure, to use a rolled up towel to begin with, just to help give them some support in that area, or you can buy proper lumbar support cushions. But another, two things we need to think about, which a lot of people don't really think about. So the lumbar is one, but the other thing is what your butt's sat on. So if your butt is sat on a wonky surface and it's buckled, it's going to make your whole spine buckle to one way, and you're going to try and buckle back the other way, which again is putting you into that kind of horrible, sort of lateral flexion. And again, if you've got, one bad hip versus one good hip, that's basically, what you've got going on. You've got a load of passive aggravators where you're slightly buckled, and that's why one hip's shut down, but the other one feels okay. So what we need to look at, not just the lumbar support, we also need to look at the base of the actual sofa, because if the base is wrong or wonky, anything you put on top is going to be wrong or wonky. But also we need to look at basically, the cushion that your butt is sat on and making sure that's giving you adequate support. So 9 times out of 10, they usually use, varying densities of foam in there. Sometimes, better ones will use, maybe one, 2 or 3 different types of foam kind of wrapped around each other. So what I do in this video is I just show you how, because I've never got one with our couch that we've got, it's not a cheap one by any means, how, I sort of fixed that by replacing the foam in here, and then what I had to do to kind of make it look better as well, because it's very easy to buy high density foam, slip it into the covers, but generally, because it's so stiff, it doesn't kind of fill the covers up properly, so it can make the couch look a little bit weird. So I get some extra bits and pieces and just sort of show you how I put it in. So the hardest thing with this is actually, it's not getting the foam, that's easy to get hold of. It's not cutting the foam to the right shape, because again, that's pretty easy, because the shops that will sell it usually will be able to cut it for you. The hard bit is actually getting the foam into and out of the kind of the couch covers. That's the hard bit. So you see how I do it in the videos, a sort of technique that the guys at the shop showed me, which helps massively, but also using some silicone spray on the foam and the actual couch cover itself. So it gives you a little bit of lubrication, a bit of slip, so it's easier to get the couch covers on, and also adjust the seams so your couch just doesn't look like it's all weird and twisted up. But the idea is that if we've got, we know the base is sound, we've got reasonable lumbar support, and now we've got a good support for our butt, you've basically covered you know, literally all your bases in terms of sitting well. So now we know the butt's level, we've got lumbar support. You know, you can sit in your couch for 2 or 3 hours watching TV or movies or Netflix, whatever it may be, and you know the chances of you slipping into bad posture are pretty minimal. Not going to say it's impossible, but it's pretty minimal. So that's what's going to buy you that time, is having the furniture do the work to maintain your posture for you. Okay guys, I'm going to switch to a voiceover here. So this is the original stuff that I took out. As you can see, I had a couple layers to it, but it was no good because it was too soft. This is the higher density foam, so much better, but of course it's super flat. So in order to get it to kind of fill the same space so the couch doesn't look weird and kind of flat, I'm going to have to make up that little bit of difference. So we've got some extra cover here, extra stuffing from the furniture supplier. So what I've got to do is cut it, wrap it around and basically glue it to it, and it's going to basically look as close as possible. Okay, I'll just give you an idea of the gluing. So this is using the foam spray adhesive, which I've got from the same supplier. So you notice it does kind of spray in a kind of a weird pattern. I think it's to help you kind of just get an even spread. So it kind of took me a while to figure out that's what you're supposed to do with it. But you want a good covering. You want to put a good covering on the actual foam you're going to use, but then also the stuff, whether it's foam or stuff that you're going to wrap around it as well. So you've got two sort of areas of contact that you're going to put together. So you can see I'm going to spray it here on the you know, the extra stuffing that I've got to wrap around. So this stuff goes everywhere, so I definitely suggest you want to be doing it in a garage or a workshop, or just definitely not inside the house, because it does sort of dry pretty quickly and get pretty tacky pretty quickly. And also you want to be careful when you put it on, like make sure you get the alignment right, because there really isn't any give. Once it's made contact, you're pretty much stuck with whatever position it's in. So you can see here I'm just being a little bit careful to kind of get it lined up. And just trying to get it kind of close, as close as I can with the edges, if that makes sense. So yeah, it's definitely a bit tricky, so just take your time with it. But yeah, you see they're even just trying to get it, you know, slightly misaligned there and trying to readjust it. You know, even then it was trying to pull that kind of stuffing apart. So here I've got to get my line up a little bit better. So yeah, it's not the easiest stuff to work with, as you can see. Gets a bit tricky. So yeah, be prepared for a little bit of a challenge with this stuff. So here we go, get a slightly better line up. So those of you who've ever installed block concrete paving before recognise that position. It's a good way to lower down a big, you know, concrete paver. And then obviously then it's just a question of, you know, spraying the rest of it and getting that kind of wrap around to go on as well. Okay, so now is the tricky bit, which is actually getting it all back into the cover. So you can see what I'm doing there is I'm using my body weight to sort of clamp it down and kind of bend it a little bit in the middle. This is what the guys at the shop showed me. It does make it way easier. Obviously, you've got to make sure you've got kind of flexible hips if you're going to do it this way. Probably wouldn't be as bad if I had a higher work surface to kind of work on a work table. But this idea is you fold it in half, or kind of bend it in the middle, I should say. It just gives you a little bit more slack to get that cover on, especially initially when you're trying to get it through the actual, like where the zipper is, because that tends to be a little bit shorter than it should be for whatever reason. But even so, it is still a bit of a nightmare to get it in. It does take a bit of effort, but this is where that silicone lubricant, that spray, makes a massive difference. I cannot stress the importance of doing this with the silicone spray. Whatever you do, I would not recommend trying to do that without using the silicone spray. The difference that makes is astronomical, especially when you first start and kind of getting the fine tuning towards the end as well. So you can still see it's a little bit of a tricky process. Okay, so when you get it back in, it's just a question of fine tuning it to get to match up the seams as best as you can. So again, silicone spray helps massively with this as well. But just kind of just grabbing it with my fingers, then just kind of using my wrist and a hand strength to kind of just pull it and get it kind of lined up a lot better, just to kind of finish it off.